My name is Margaret Chen, and I'm 58 years old now. The story I'm about to tell you happened when I was 16, but I remember it as clearly as if it were yesterday. Some moments in life carve themselves so deeply into your soul that time cannot erode them. This is one of those moments. I grew up in a modest brick house on Elm Street, where the maple trees turned golden every autumn and the neighborhood smelled of freshly cut grass in summer. My father, Robert Chen, was a company lawyer with silver-streaked hair and kind eyes that crinkled at the corners when he smiled. He was a man of few words but profound actions. My mother had passed away when I was 12, leaving my father to raise me and my younger sister Emily, who was 14 at the time of this story. Emily and I were as different as chalk and cheese. She was bubbly, popular at school, always surrounded by friends. I was quieter, more reserved, the kind of girl who preferred books to parties. But beneath our differences ran a current of sisterly rivalry that sometimes erupted into storms. It was a crisp October evening when everything changed. The leaves were falling outside our dining room window, creating a carpet of red and gold on our lawn. Dad had just come home from work, loosening his burgundy tie as he walked through the door. Emily had been in the kitchen, and I could hear her humming as she set the table. "Margaret, Emily, dinner's ready," Dad called out in his steady, calm voice. I came downstairs, my mind still tangled in the calculus homework I'd been struggling with. Emily was already seated, her blonde hair pulled back in a ponytail, a slight smirk on her face that I'd come to recognize as trouble. "So, Margaret," she began, her tone dripping with false sweetness, "did you really think no one would notice you borrowed my blue sweater without asking and then returned it with a stain on it?" I felt my cheeks flush. "It was just a small coffee spill, Emily. I washed it. You're making a big deal out of nothing." "Nothing?" Her voice rose. "That was my favorite sweater. You never ask permission. You just take whatever you want." "That's not true," I shot back, my own anger rising. "You're being dramatic as usual." Dad raised his hand slightly, a gesture that usually meant we should lower our voices. "Girls, let's talk about this calmly." But Emily wasn't finished. "She's always like this, Dad. She thinks she's better than everyone because she gets good grades. But she has no respect for other people's things." Something inside me snapped. At least I don't spend all my time gossiping with friends and ignoring my responsibilities. Maybe if you cared half as much about your schoolwork as you do about your wardrobe, you wouldn't be struggling in English. The moment the words left my mouth, I saw Emily's face crumble. It was a low blow, and I knew it. Her struggles with English had been a sensitive topic. She'd been working with a tutor, trying hard to improve, and I'd just thrown it in her face like a weapon. Tears welled up in her eyes. She pushed back from the table and ran upstairs. I heard her bedroom door slam shut. The silence that followed was deafening. Dad set down his fork slowly, deliberately. He looked at me with an expression I'd never seen before. It wasn't anger exactly. It was deeper than that. Disappointment mixed with sadness. "Margaret," he said quietly, "that was cruel. Dad, she started it. She was attacking me over a sweater." He shook his head slowly. "A sweater can be washed, replaced, forgotten. But words, Margaret, words cut deeper than any stain. They leave marks that don't wash away." I crossed my arms defensively. "She's always picking fights with me. Why do I have to be the one to apologize?" Dad stood up from the table. He walked to the window and looked out at the falling leaves for a long moment before turning back to me. "You're suspended from everything except school and homework until you genuinely apologize to your sister. No phone, no television, no going out with friends. You'll come home directly after school." I stared at him in disbelief. "You're punishing me? What about her?" Emily didn't mock her sister's struggles. "You did, and you know better, Margaret. I raised you to be kinder than that." The unfairness of it all burned in my chest. But I knew my father well enough to know that arguing further would be pointless. When Robert Chen made a decision, it stood firm as oak. I stood up from the table, my jaw tight. "All right," I said, the word clipped and cold. I walked upstairs to my room, closed the door, and sat on my bed, arms wrapped around my knees. The word had come out so easily. All right. But inside I was seething. How could Dad take her side? How could he not see that she'd provoked me? That night, I lay in bed staring at the ceiling, watching shadows dance across the plaster. I could hear Emily crying softly in the next room, and something in my chest tightened. But pride is a stubborn companion, and I pushed the feeling away. The next morning, I woke to the sound of my alarm and went through my routine mechanically. Shower, dress, breakfast. Dad was already at the kitchen table, reading the newspaper with his morning coffee. Emily's seat was empty. "Where's Emily?" I asked, pouring myself orange juice. Dad looked up, and I noticed the lines around his eyes seemed deeper than usual. "She left early, said she'd get breakfast at school." I sat down with my toast and we ate in silence. It wasn't the comfortable silence we used to share. This silence had weight to it, pressing down on both of us. "Dad," I started, but he held up his hand. "When you're ready to apologize, Margaret, do it because you mean it, not because I'm forcing you." I grabbed my backpack and headed out the door without another word. School that day was torture. I went through my classes in a fog, barely hearing the teachers. During lunch, my friend Sarah noticed something was wrong. "You okay, Mags?" she asked, biting into her sandwich. "Just family stuff," I muttered. "Want to talk about it?" I shook my head. How could I explain that I felt both wronged and wrong at the same time? That my father's disappointment hurt more than any punishment he could have given me? After school, I walked home alone. Usually, Emily and I walked together, even when we weren't getting along. But today, she was nowhere to be seen. The autumn air was cool against my face, and I watched the leaves crunch under my feet, each step feeling heavier than the last. When I got home, the house was quiet, too quiet. I called out, "Anyone home?" No answer. I walked through the living room, the kitchen, then started up the stairs. Emily's door was slightly ajar. I pushed it open. The room was empty, but it was more than empty. Her desk had been cleared. The photos she kept on her bulletin board were gone. Her closet door hung open, revealing empty hangers. My heart started pounding. I ran to my father's study. "Dad? Dad!" He appeared at the top of the stairs, and when he saw my face, his expression shifted to concern. "Margaret, what's wrong?" "Emily's room. Her things are gone." Dad's face went pale. He moved past me quickly, striding into Emily's room. I watched from the doorway as he took in the same scene I had. He walked to her desk and picked up a piece of paper that had been left there. His hands trembled slightly as he read it. The color drained from his face completely. He sat down heavily on Emily's bed, the paper falling from his fingers to the floor. I picked it up and read it, and my entire world tilted. "Dad, I can't do this anymore. Margaret hates me, and I don't want to be a burden to either of you. I'm going to stay with Aunt Linda for a while, maybe forever. Please don't try to find me. I just need to be somewhere where I'm not constantly reminded of how much I disappoint everyone. I love you. I'm sorry I'm not as smart as Margaret. I'm sorry I'm not enough. Emily." The paper slipped from my fingers. "No," I whispered. "No, no, no." Dad stood up, his lawyer's composure returning as crisis mode kicked in. "I need to call Linda." He rushed to his study, and I heard him dialing, his voice tense but controlled. "Linda, Linda, is Emily there? Please tell me she's there." I couldn't hear Aunt Linda's response, but I saw my father's shoulders sag with relief. "Thank God. No, don't. I mean, yes, she can stay the night, but I'm coming to get her. We need to talk, all of us." He hung up and turned to me. The look on his face was something I'll never forget. It wasn't anger anymore, it was anguish. "She's safe. She's at Linda's in Millbrook." "But Margaret, do you understand what almost happened here? Do you understand how close we came to something terrible?" My legs gave out and I sank to the floor right there in his study. Tears I'd been holding back for a day and a half burst forth. I didn't mean it. I didn't mean any of it. I was just angry. Dad knelt down beside me and pulled me into his arms, something he hadn't done since I was a little girl. I know, sweetheart, I know. But Emily didn't know that. She's been carrying this weight, feeling like she's not good enough, and your words confirmed her worst fears about herself. I'm so sorry, I sobbed. I'm so sorry. Don't tell me, he said gently, stroking my hair. Tell her. We drove to Aunt Linda's house that evening. It was a 2-hour drive through winding country roads as the sun set behind the hills. Dad and I barely spoke, each lost in our own thoughts. I kept replaying that moment at dinner, wishing I could take back those words. Rewind time, be better than I'd been. Aunt Linda's house was a cozy cottage with a wraparound porch. She met us at the door, her face grave. She's in the guest room. She's been crying all afternoon, Robert. Dad nodded. Can Margaret go up first? Alone? Linda looked surprised but stepped aside. Last door on the left upstairs. I climbed those stairs slowly, each step an effort. My hand shook as I knocked on the guest room door. Go away, came Emily's muffled voice. It's me. Please. I need to talk to you. I don't want to talk to you. I know, and you have every right to feel that way. But please, just give me 5 minutes. There was a long pause. Then I heard footsteps, and the door opened a crack. Emily's face appeared, red and puffy from crying. She looked smaller somehow, more fragile than I'd ever seen her. What do you want? She asked, her voice barely above a whisper. To apologize. Really apologize. Not because Dad told me to, but because I'm genuinely deeply sorry for what I said. She didn't open the door wider, but she didn't close it either. I took that as permission to continue. What I said about your English grades was cruel and unfair. You've been working so hard with your tutor, and I see how much effort you put in. I was angry, and I grabbed the thing I knew would hurt you most, and I used it like a weapon. That was wrong. That was so wrong. Tears started flowing down my cheeks again, and it wasn't even true. You're not struggling because you're not smart. You're one of the smartest people I know. You understand people in ways I never will. You make friends so easily. You make everyone around you feel welcome and valued. Those are gifts I've always been jealous of. Emily's eyes widened slightly. Jealous? Of me? Yes, of you. You light up every room you walk into. People love you immediately. I've always felt like I'm on the outside looking in, and you're at the center of everything, making it all look so easy. The door opened a bit wider. Emily stepped out into the hallway, and for the first time, we really looked at each other. Really saw each other. I thought you hated me, she said softly. I thought you looked down on me, because I'm not good at school like you are. I don't hate you, Em. I love you. You're my sister. And I've been a terrible sister lately. I haven't been great either, she admitted. I pick fights with you sometimes because I feel like you're pulling away from me. We used to be so close, Mags. Remember when we were little and we'd build blanket forts and tell each other stories until Dad made us go to bed? I nodded, a small smile breaking through my tears. You always insisted on being the princess, and I had to be the dragon. You were a very good dragon, she said. And despite everything, we both laughed a little. The laughter broke something open between us. Emily stepped forward and wrapped her arms around me, and I hugged her back tightly, both of us crying and laughing at the same time. I'm sorry, I whispered into her hair. I'm so sorry. Please come home. I'm sorry too, she said, for the sweater thing. And for saying you think you're better than everyone. I didn't mean it. We stood there in that hallway, holding each other, until Dad appeared at the top of the stairs. He took one look at us, and his eyes filled with tears. He opened his arms, and we both ran to him, the three of us holding each other like we hadn't since Mom died. My girls, he said, his voice thick with emotion. My beautiful, complicated, wonderful girls. That night, we all stayed at Aunt Linda's. She made us hot chocolate and her famous chocolate chip cookies, and we sat around her kitchen table talking until late into the night. Emily and I talked about things we'd never discussed before, our fears, our insecurities, our dreams. Dad mostly listened, occasionally offering gentle wisdom. "You know what your mother used to say?" he told us as midnight approached. "She said that sisters are like two different flowers in the same garden. You don't need to be the same to be beautiful together. You just need to give each other room to grow." Emily and I exchanged glances. We'd both been trying to outshine each other when we should have been helping each other bloom. We drove home the next morning, all three of us in Dad's old sedan. The autumn sun was bright, the air crisp and clean. Everything looked different, somehow. Like the world had shifted slightly on its axis and revealed colors I hadn't noticed before. Over the following weeks, Emily and I worked on rebuilding our relationship. It wasn't always easy. We still argued sometimes. But now, when tensions rose, one of us would remember that night, and we'd stop, take a breath, and choose our words more carefully. I started helping Emily with her English homework, not in a condescending way, but as partners working together. She helped me understand the social dynamics at school that had always confused me. We learned to appreciate each other's strengths, instead of resenting them. Dad never said "I told you so." He didn't need to. But I noticed he smiled more, laughed easier. The tension that had been building in our house for months dissolved like morning mist. Years later, when I was in my 30s and Emily was planning her wedding, she asked me to be her maid of honor. We were sitting in her apartment, surrounded by wedding magazines and fabric samples. "Remember that time I ran away to Aunt Linda's?" she asked suddenly. I nodded. "I think about it more often than you'd imagine." "Me too," she said. "It was scary, Mags. I felt so lost that day. But in a weird way, I'm grateful it happened." I looked at her in surprise. Grateful? It taught us how to really see each other, how to fight fair, how to love each other despite our differences. If that hadn't happened, I wonder if we would have drifted apart completely as we got older. She was right. That terrible, wonderful night had been a turning point. It taught me that pride isn't worth sacrificing the people you love. That "all right" said in anger can lead to consequences you never imagined. That sometimes the bravest thing you can do is admit you were wrong. Now, at 58, I think about my father often. He passed away 5 years ago, peacefully in his sleep. At his funeral, Emily and I both spoke. We talked about his wisdom, his patience, his quiet strength. But we also talked about that October evening when he suspended me, when he refused to let cruelty slide, even when it came from his own daughter. "He taught us," Emily said through her tears, "that being family means holding each other accountable while never giving up on each other. He showed us that love isn't just acceptance. Sometimes love means saying, 'This isn't okay,' and waiting patiently while we figure out how to do better." I looked at my sister as she spoke, at the woman she'd become. She was a high school English teacher now, helping students who struggled just like she once did. She'd turned her challenges into her calling, and I'd become a mediator, helping families and businesses resolve conflicts. That night with Emily had shown me the power of genuine apology, of listening, of seeing beyond anger to the hurt underneath. We still have Sunday dinners together, Emily and her husband, me and mine, and all our kids. We set an extra place at the table sometimes, a quiet tribute to Dad and to Mom. The kids don't always understand it, but Emily and I do, because we remember what it costs to learn that family isn't just about sharing blood or a name. It's about showing up, even when it's hard. It's about saying sorry and meaning it. It's about suspending your pride long enough to see the other person's pain. My father suspended me that October evening, but what he really suspended was my certainty that I was right. He suspended my belief that winning an argument mattered more than preserving a relationship. He suspended the part of me that thought, all right was enough when someone you love deserves better. That single word, all right, spoken so coldly at the dinner table, almost cost me my sister. It took the possibility of losing her to understand what I had. It took her empty room to realize how much space she filled in my life. It took my father's disappointed face to understand that being smart about books means nothing if you're careless with hearts. Sometimes I wonder what would have happened if Dad hadn't stood firm that night. What if he'd laughed it off as just another sisterly spat? What if he'd punished us both equally and moved on? I don't think Emily would have left. But I don't think we would have healed either. We would have just kept collecting small wounds until one day we looked up and realized we were strangers, sharing a last name. The older I get, the more I understand my father's wisdom. He knew that some lessons can't be taught with words. They have to be lived through, struggled with, earned through pain and growth. He knew that protecting me from the consequences of my cruelty would have been the cruelest thing of all. So yes, I was suspended that autumn. But in being grounded, I found my footing. In being restricted, I found freedom from the pride that had been slowly poisoning my most important relationships. In being forced to confront my own capacity for harm, I learned how to heal. Emily and I are closer now than we've ever been. We talk almost every day. We laugh about our teenagers and compare notes on parenting. We support each other through job stress and health scares and all the ordinary challenges of middle age. And sometimes, when one of us is about to say something sharp, the other will catch her eye and we'll both pause. We'll remember, and we'll choose better words. That's my father's real legacy. Not the money he left us or the house or his law books. It's this, the understanding that love requires courage, the courage to hold people accountable, the courage to admit when you're wrong, the courage to believe that people can change, can grow, can become better than they were yesterday. I wish everyone could have a father like mine, someone who loved us enough to let us stumble, but who was always there to help us stand back up, someone who understood that discipline isn't about punishment, it's about teaching. Someone who knew that all right isn't always all right, and that sometimes the kindest thing you can say is, no, that's not good enough. To anyone listening who's in the middle of a family conflict, who's said something they regret, who's choosing pride over reconciliation, I want you to know this, it's never too late to apologize. It's never too late to choose love over being right. Your all right doesn't have to be the end of the story. It can be the beginning of something better, if you're brave enough to follow it with, I'm sorry, and mean it with your whole heart. And to anyone who's hurting from someone else's words, know this too. People can change. People can grow. Sometimes the person who wounds us deepest can also teach us the most about forgiveness, if we're willing to let them try. Emily gave me that chance, and it made all the difference. My father's smile that October evening may have died on the spot, but it came back, brighter than before, because he saw his daughters learn to truly love each other. And in the end, isn't that what every parent wants? Not perfect children, but children who know how to repair what they've broken. Children who understand that relationships are more valuable than pride. Children who can say, I'm sorry and I love you and mean both with equal intensity. That's the story of how a single word, all right, spoken in anger and defiance, led me to the most important lesson of my life. How my father's loving discipline saved my relationship with my sister. How losing something precious even for just one night taught me to cherish it forever. Thank you for listening to my story. If it touched your heart, I'd be grateful if you'd like this video, share it with someone who might need to hear it, and subscribe to hear more stories about family, love, and the lessons that shape us. Leave a comment below and tell me about a time when you learned an important lesson about family. Your story might be exactly what someone else needs to hear today.